Hello friends, welcome back. My name's Ramon. How are you today? If you haven't seen my original Kylie Skin SPF video, you would know that the minute I saw the teasers, the application footage, all the brand promo stuff, the first thing that came to my mind was it's a Supergoop dupe. And I did a whole explanation in the video how even just looking at the ingredients list upon launch, I was like, literally just, they took, it's the exact same ingredients list for like 98% of the formulation. Mix some stuff up a little bit, but it's the same exact ingredients list, which that's not bad. They probably just went through the same manufacturer that had a stock sunscreen formulation, and for cost-effective purposes they just utilized that and switched up maybe one or two things, right? Well, I got the Kylie sunscreen finally, and so I'm going to be doing a wear test comparing this to the Supergoop sunscreen, but there's one more caveat. This is a store brand version of the Supergoop sunscreen from Kroger, and it's the Kroger Invisible Gel SPF40. This came up because I had some people in my comments from the Kylie Skin video be like, oh, Kroger has a version of this. It's $10.99 for 3 ounces, aka 89 mil. That's almost double the amount in both a Supergoop and the Kylie for literally less than half the price. So I was like, okay, well, if this is a contender, this is definitely going to be something that could change this whole situation. With that being said, I'm going to be doing a full day wear test of all of these sunscreens to test and see if with such similar formulations, are they actually dupes of each other? Is one of them better than the other? Are the formulations really worth it? We'll find out. Before getting today's video, I'm gonna have to hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, so that you know when I post more sunscreen related content. And down below, did you buy the Kylie sunscreen? Do you even like the Supergoop sunscreen? Will you be trying this Kroger sunscreen? Let me know. So here we have the Kylie Face SPF. Here we have the Supergoop Unseen Sunscreen. And this last one right here is the Kroger Invisible Gel SPF. And so you can see they look a little bit different, but basically what all of them have in common, pretty much the same dimethicone based sunscreen formulation. They all have the same sunscreen filters. They're all intended to be invisible gel SPFs that you can wear under makeup. And for the most part, they have super similar textures, formulations, and wears. With these sunscreens and these wear tests, basically what I'm gonna be doing is putting on the full 1/4 teaspoon to get the full protection on the packaging on my face, my ears, and my neck, over the top of just really simple hydrators and moisturizer. So with all of these, I'm gonna be testing the feel, the finish, the filters, the formulation, and the foundation wear. These all claim to be great bases for makeup. They all claim to be pore blurring, mattifying, long wear, foundation bases, makeup gripping, moisturizing. These ones specifically actually advertise waterproof or water resistant finishes, 40 minutes versus 80 minutes. I'm not testing that out. But basically, just because the claims are so similar, the formulations are so similar, I'm gonna be testing if these are in fact dupes. So yeah, next time I see you, we're gonna be at the end of the wear test, and I'm gonna tell you what I really feel about the sunscreens, if they are in fact similar, how the wear test for each sunscreen was, and if I feel if any one of them is better than the other, if one of them is a better dupe for all the other ones. We'll find out. See you soon. So here we are at day 4. I did 1 day for each of the sunscreens, the Kylie, the Supergoop, and the Kroger, but I also went back and did a 4th day with the Kylie just because my first day, I didn't feel like I necessarily gave it a fair chance. Anytime using a sunscreen for the first time, you have to kind of learn how it applies and how it wears and whatnot. So I wanted to give this a fair shot. Going into each day, I did a standard application, a full 1/4 teaspoon of each of the sunscreens. Day 1, I did Kylie Skin, first time trying it out, interested in the whole concept of it. With all these, because these are organic chemical filters, there was no likelihood of white cast. They all advertised being translucent, invisible, unseen. I knew it'd be fine putting them on. I wasn't focused on white cast. The feel of them though, for Kylie Skin, it was a silicone primer. Think like that, remember that Smashbox primer that everyone used for a good couple years? It was silicone. The finish of it though, again, it's a silicone primer, so it's gonna blur. There was a little bit of a mattifying effect, but I still I felt moisturized. It didn't dry me out necessarily, and that's just due to the dimethicone base of all of these. So the finish, I looked slightly blurred and airbrushed, but I still looked very natural. This wore beautifully in facial hair. There was no weird texture situations with pilling and skincare, so it wore really great. The reason I felt like I had to go in with a second application of this on day 4 was because for day 1, in learning how to apply it, I thought I did a good job putting it on, but I'm used to more lotion texture sunscreens, you know, the Korean and Japanese textures that I use on my channel a lot. I can haphazardly apply them, but I know they're going to set down and they're going to form that barrier. Because these are silicone based primers, dimethicone based primers, made the mistake of assuming they'd react the same, and they didn't. So I had issues on day 1 with applying it where I didn't massage it and work it in well enough, and therefore when I went in with makeup, because it didn't really set down really nicely and there was uneven patches of the sunscreen everywhere, I could not use a brush and buff in makeup. I couldn't stipple in with a brush even. I had to have my boyfriend go wet a sponge for me to be able to press the sunscreen in. And I don't know if you can see it for day one's footage. There was just spots I felt like I could not get foundation to stick. And other spots where because of like the weird uneven application, there was like lines of where there was like excess primer versus no primer or whatever. But it went on my ears and my neck seamlessly. The thing with this is at the end of the day, these are still sunscreens. They still have some like texture to them. So on my ears, they feel kind of greasy, and on my hands, if I don't wash my hands, I have like that texture. And then for 8-hour wear test, surprisingly, like granted, we're in quarantine times. I had a mask on. You can see the clear distinction. I wasn't happy with it, but that's just based off the application itself wasn't good. I had a friend like shine a flashlight on my face and she was like, oh, that's not your skin texture. That's the makeup texture looking weird on your skin. So I didn't have a really good basis for how I was going to wear after 8 hours on day one. Day two, I went with the Supergoop Unseen Sunscreen. And granted, I've known of this for years. I've technically swatched this, but I've never used it or applied it as a sunscreen. Still, somehow I knew that these two were going to be very similar. Because I knew how this one applied this time for this Unseen Sunscreen, I applied it a lot better, massaged it in. Very similar to Kylie, as I expected. Everything pretty much was the same. Texture-wise, the feel of it, the finish of it, they were very, very similar to each other. There was really no distinct difference that I noticed, except for the color and a little bit of the smell. The smells were different, but still they lived in the similar realm, and I'll get to that in a little bit. It went on great. My skin looked great. Makeup went on top of it a lot better this day, just because of how I learned from my Kylie mistake. And at the end of the day, my foundation looked pretty okay. And I was like, okay, for a $30-something sunscreen, I expect this to work well. So no disappointments with that. And then day three was the Kroger sunscreen. And this one, I was a little curious about. My boyfriend swatched this when he first got it, and he was like, ooh, I don't know if you're gonna like it. If you're concerned about the Kylie and the Supergoop being a weird texture, this one's gonna be a weird texture. Looking at the ingredients list, which I'll get to a little bit more in depth in a little bit, this features a very different formulation towards the end of the ingredients list and features things like mineral oils, some other stuff that was like, oh, that's going to be interesting. I like this one the most. And that's coming from someone who I was really apprehensive about trying like a very silicone-based sunscreen, someone who has oily skin. And I was like, I don't know how it's going to work for summertime with oily skin once it gets really hot and humid like it is outside in Chicago. I like this one a lot. It's massaged on really well. It's set down really well. I felt moisturized. For all these, I felt moisturized. But for this one, I was just like considering my experience with the other ones and my initial apprehension with this, it was my favorite out of all of them. I worked into my skin really well. Makeup went on top of it really well because it set down super well. My skin was primed and moisturized and slightly blurred. At the end of 8 hours, actually I think it was more like 10 hours for these days, my face looked amazing still. So I was like, oh, $11. And so then today's day 4, I went back in with Kylie because I was like, I need to give this a second chance. You know, some people are really going to want to try this and buy this and use this regularly. I'm not going to give this a very biased review just because I don't like Kylie's skin brand. Like, I'm still, as someone who looks at something in a very like scientific experimental way, like I can't be biased in an experiment, you know? So I went in again today, same skincare. This time I really worked it into my skin just to be sure, like, okay, I have it applied, everything like patted it in, should be good. And I really liked the makeup application on top of this today because I worked it in a lot better. It actually sat down like the other two did. I could actually buff foundation into it a lot better. My skin looked blurred and nice, and my makeup sat really well on my skin. With the ears and the neck part, as with all of these, kind of similar situation where at the end of the day, these are sunscreens. They're going to feel like sunscreens. They're going to feel a little bit more emollient, and that's just part of the ingredients list with these being really dimethicone heavy. But overall, I really, really like these. Today, as I do with most of my mineral sunscreen tests, I actually went in and reapplied. With sunscreens, you should reapply every couple hours. This has to do with just throughout the day as you sweat, as you're touching your face or whatever's happening. You are rubbing off sunscreen as your oils kind of seep through, it's breaking down sunscreen. So you should just reapply consistently every few hours, especially if you're more outdoors, to make sure you're getting sufficient sunscreen protection. And because if you look on the Kylie Skin website, it recommends reapply every couple hours. For my sunscreen lotions, I always apply the product to the back of my hands. Using a little air cushion puff, I go in and apply on top. When I did that with this sunscreen, you can see the footage. I mean, it took off coverage. It took off pigment. It took off product. You can see it on my puff, and you can see in the footage, it like broke up the foundation in really weird areas. So I don't recommend reapplying this in this aspect. I don't recommend reapplying this in this regard at all if you're wearing makeup. If you're wearing makeup, I have a whole separate video where I kind of explain different methods and ways of reapplying sunscreen throughout the day, depending on like what your skin type is and what your needs are. Applying something like this primer related isn't going to work. And the reason why is if you know makeup, if you've studied makeup, or if you know like a lot of tips and tricks, there's actually a trick where you can take primers on like a swab or a puff, and you can actually remove makeup with those. It's actually a really good trick to like clean up lip lines or eyeliner lines, is to take eye primer on like a cotton bud and just use that. It removes the pigment, it picks it up, but also leaves down a primed surface behind it so that you can go back in and apply whatever product you need. And that's kind of what this did. It just lifted off the product, but left a very nicely primed surface. So I can probably go and reapply makeup and it's gonna look good. These are primers, these are silicone primers. It's gonna leave my skin like prepped. But I don't recommend reapplying this going over and reviewing all of my thoughts when I tested these sunscreens out and kind of talking about the filters, formulation, and my final thoughts. I'm gonna start by saying I will never, ever recommend for you to go and buy a luxury sunscreen. Reason being is I find, in my opinion, sunscreens are a daily necessity for medical related reasons. They protect your skin and keep your skin safe from UV related damage. And so in my opinion, like, sunscreens need to be easily accessible, easily affordable for a wide audience and demographic of people. Recommending luxury sunscreens goes against my ethics in that regard. So I'm never going to recommend sunscreens that are above $20 generally. You don't need either of these. This one will suffice, trust me. But in reality, why I did this test is because essentially the Kylie is a lower end dupe for the Supergoop if you get this in store. If you buy this online, when you get shipping and tax involved, they're comparable. But beyond that, I also brought into the game another dupe that's even more cost effective than the other two combined. So I was like, if I can find a more cost effective dupe for both of those, even better. Overall, basically what these are is pretty good strength, really decently formulated sunscreens in dimethicone rich vehicles. Think primer meets sunscreen, one product. And as I mentioned, my initial apprehension was this primer kind of texture put in such a thick opaque layer over my skin with my oily skin, and this heat might not be good. But surprisingly, all these textures really set down, all of them. I felt you had that dimethicone texture, which if you don't like the texture on your skin, it's in all of these. It does sit down a little bit, therefore it's not slip slidey. I didn't find I was having my foundation slide off my face. It actually sat down and gave me a really nice barrier on top of my skin underneath my makeup. No negative experiences with any of them except for Kylie Day 1, but I worked through that. I will say though that these are sunscreens. They smell like sunscreens. They don't all smell the same, but these smell like sunscreens. And that was one of the weird experiences of oh, none of them are scented, none of them are fragranced. These two aren't, but they still had a sunscreen smell to them because there's nothing put into them to mask that smell either. And they're also a little bit more emollient, so that kind of feeling stays on your ears and your neck and stays on your hands. So unless you want a greasy ass phone, you want to wash your hands. Filter wise, they all have the same filters. Avobenzone as the UVA protectant, homosalate, octosalate, octocrylene as the UVB filters. Octocrylene you find a lot in waterproof sunscreens, and that's why you find it in these two. These two are water resistant, Supergoop being for 40 minutes, the Kroger brand being for 80 minutes. Mind you, I mentioned these two, the formulation is pretty much 95% of the way the same thing. Kylie doesn't advertise being water resistant or sweat resistant in any way, shape, or form, which is odd to me. But these formulations are rich in dimethicone, so they have that skin blurring effect, they have skin conditioning effects, they have hydrating and moisturizing effects in the form of more occlusive agents, and they have skin softening ingredients. So overall, they're meant to leave your skin very airbrush, soft, matte, blurred, but moisturize and retain any of that hydration you have in your skin. The Kylie and the Supergoop have the added advantages of marine algae extracts and all these extra antioxidants and all these different things to help condition the skin, add moisture and hydration to the skin, antioxidant benefits to the skin. The Kroger brand one only has tocopherol, which is vitamin E. It also has aloe extract that's a soothing agent. So in terms of formulation, this one's a lot more basic. Think of this as the base model for what these are based off of. These have all the extra zhuzh and bougie ingredients that aren't bad necessarily. They actually do benefit the formulation, especially with the Kylie one. I will give her the props where one of the algae extracts has vitamin A, C, and E, and you have the tocopherol in there as well. You have other soothing agents, and those boost the kind of UV efficacy of the sunscreen, which I'll get to in a little bit as well. Overall, they're all formulated really well. And Kylie, I will say, for the formulation of her sunscreen, there's good in this. There's a lot of nice little boosters in there. But what I will say is for all those antioxidants and stuff, for all the sunscreens, it falls towards the last few ingredients on the ingredients list. So you're not getting a huge kick out of them necessarily. These are all alcohol free, so there's no alcohol in any of them. The solvents, again, are the dimethicones and whatnot that are in the formulations, the first few ingredients. And again, they all have the same filter. So these are all very, very broad spectrum. And they have other ingredients that specifically boost the efficacy and the stability of the UVA and UVB filters. And there's ingredients that all of these have to essentially stabilize that ingredient and really boost the SPF protection of these sunscreens. The Kroger brand has one, the Supergoop has a different one, and then Kylie has both of them combined. So I'm just oh, they really put the thought and effort in formulating this. And those photo stability backing ingredients also help with the texture, spreadability, the elegance of these sunscreens. So overall, texture-wise, ingredient-wise, formulation-wise, all of these have pros. Kylie, gonna be honest, actually has a lot of benefits to the formulation that I wasn't expecting necessarily. They put a lot of thought into the sunscreen. And that being said, Supergoop, because these are the most similar out of all three of them, also has a great benefits to it as well, but you're paying for that when you're paying the $30-something price point in this. And so then we get to the Kroger brand, and this one is a lot simpler of a formulation, but at the end of the day, it's a really cost-effective, broad spectrum, organic sunscreen, aka chemical sunscreen, that has a really awesome formulation to it. It has the mineral oil, which is going to act as a really nice occlusive agent to really moisturize the skin, really soften the skin. Mineral oils are not bad for the skin. I'll leave a link below so you can research what I looked up to kind of read about it, but they're not bad. It has aloe to soothe. It has the agents to really stabilize and fortify the UV filters in this. The only con is that this does have orange peel oil, and orange peel oil is one of those essential oils which actually, when exposed to UV light, has some phototoxic effect to it. So it's not the best thing to have in a sunscreen. Am I gonna overlook that because it's $11 for 3 fluid ounces? Yes. For reference, Kylie Skin, $28 for 50 ml. I'm not gonna recommend that for the price. So that being said, the Kroger one actually won for me in that it offered what the other ones were kind of really advertising and a much more cost-effective product. I don't need all the extra zhuzh because in reality, all I want my sunscreen to do is just give me really good broad spectrum protection and be able to last throughout the day. The 80-minute water resistance in this gives me even more of a reason to want this a lot more. Kylie Skin has a really comparable formulation, but some reason it doesn't advertise being water resistant, which is a big question mark for me. And I'm not paying the money for Supergoop, I'm gonna be honest. So yeah, overall, I didn't have a bad experience with the Kylie sunscreen. I think the Kroger brand one actually offers a lot of comparable things for much better price points. My only qualm with all of these overall is they advertise being makeup bases. They're all silicone primer type bases. And when you see that, you think, oh, I need a pea-sized amount because it's a primer. No, you need to be putting on the full amount of sunscreen, 1/4 teaspoon, in order to get the proper UV protection on a packaging. There's a lot of science, a lot of research, a lot of testing that goes into getting this number. If you're not putting on enough of the sunscreen, you're not getting this number, waste of money. So just be sure you're putting on enough sunscreen. That way you're actually getting the proper UV protection you're paying for with these luxury brands. I'm probably gonna stick to this one, honestly. So yeah, that was my review on the Kylie versus Supergoop versus Kroger brands. It's a really interesting experiment. It was really fun to kind of get these dupes. Hands down, Kroger's gonna win for me just because it's more cost effective, but Kylie was actually not a bad experience. So if you found this interesting, give this video a thumbs up, hit the notification bell and that subscribe button so that you know when I post more sunscreen related content down below. Did you buy this? Did you like it? Are any of the dupes kind of interesting you now? Are you gonna get the Kroger brand? Let me know. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a good day.